when we travel, we realize you learn a lot about your home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. I had quite a moment when, in 1969, I was 14 years old and I was in Norway with relatives watching Neil Armstrong walk on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And as a little 14-year-old kid, I was actually aware that at home, all my friends are waving American flags and saying, USA, USA. And I'm in Norway, and children just like me are celebrating Neil Armstrong walking on the moon, and it's not an American accomplishment, it's a human accomplishment. Wow, it's a human accomplishment. No American that I know who's not traveled would ever think of it like that, but it's certainly a human accomplishment to walk on the moon. The takeaway from thoughtful travel is a kind of dual citizenship, a keener awareness of how thankful you might be to be an American, and at the same time, a sort of a global citizenship and a recognition that we're 4% of the planet, and there's 96% out there, and we can get to know our neighbors.
So, Rick, a lot of people know you as somebody who has encouraged Americans to travel around the world, to understand the world better through travel. We're living in a moment that seems particularly stressful and difficult, and I imagine that some people might think travel is the last thing they want to add to their plate. They may feel it's a bit indulgent, maybe even frivolous. Why would you still encourage Americans to travel even today?
Well, it's more important for Americans to travel right now than it ever has been. We're a frightened society, and the most frightened people are the people with no passports, whose worldview is shaped by commercial TV news, fear-mongering commercial TV news. And as a traveler, I spend 100 days a year, ever since I was a kid now, overseas, working on my travel writing. And I know that the flip side of fear is understanding, and we gain understanding when we travel. If everybody traveled before they voted, the United States would be in a much different situation right now.
A lot of people are anxious about the world at the moment, whether it's climate change, whether it's, wars around the world. What is it specifically about travel that is important in these moments, maybe even more important than when the world is calm and people aren't so stressed?
When we travel, we get to know the enemy. I mean, the most interesting book I ever wrote was called Travel as a Political Act. And half of that book is taken from experiences I had traveling in places my government doesn't want me to go. Palestine, Cuba, Iran. You don't go there in times of war. But Americans don't realize that the number one destination in the Caribbean for German and Canadian vacationers is Cuba. Americans can't believe that the Lonely Planet Guidebook to Cuba is a very good selling book for that publisher, because we didn't think anybody goes to Cuba. So, if more people traveled, we'd understand that everybody's had their challenges, and we can just realize the world's filled with good people. It's filled with joy. It's filled with love. And there's a few bad apples and a few complicated things, and there's some serious problems. But we can go home and aspire to get to know people instead of building a wall and hiding behind it. The beauty of people carbonates the travel experience. And when my takeaways from countries like those we've mentioned, Iran, Palestine, and Cuba, my takeaways are endearing moments with beautiful people. And it's also an awareness that people are living in very difficult situations when they live without a democracy, without freedom. And we're seeing right now in the news, in all these countries, there are real people that want real freedoms and real civil liberties, and they have real economic, challenges that if you didn't travel, you'd hardly be able to empathize with. Do you really want to learn about the realities of this planet, or would you rather just stay home and go to a barbecue with your privileged friends? It's a choice you have in your life.
Has it ever made you less happy?
It's burdened me with realities that maybe it would be easier not to know, if, as a caring citizen of this planet, as well as an American. And I'm thankful for that. because I don't want to go to my grave just with a bunch of beer commercial kind of experiences. I want to have made a difference, and I wanted to, um, do the best I can to help this world live together as it should and can, peacefully.
Since I've moved to the United States, one of the things that struck me about travel is that it's not just the experience that you have when you travel somewhere, it's the experience you bring home. And that is almost, sometimes it seems to me, as important as the traveling itself. I
Oh,
think that it's what you can bring
absolutely.
back to your country. Is that Pollyanna-ish of me, or does that resonate?
Not at all. I think that's sort of the way I conclude a lot of my books and TV shows, is the best souvenir you can take home is a broader perspective. A good traveler will see culture shock as not something you avoid.
Mm.
That's sort of the default. Oh, help me escape culture shock. Culture shock is a constructive thing. It's the growing pains of a broadening perspective, and it needs to be curated. And that's what I do as a tour guide and a travel writer, is I curate culture shock. I just love the thought that when we get out of our comfort zone and we travel as a cultural chameleon and we become what I like to call a temporary local, we have a broadening perspective. And that's the beautiful thing about travel. And a lot of people miss it entirely. They're just on the beach. They've changed the weather, but they haven't changed the culture. And that's a vacation. But I see there's three kinds of travelers. There's tourists, there's travelers, and there's pilgrims. And the default is just to be a tourist, and you're all focused in on little fun stuff. But that's seeing the road as a playground, and that's okay. But I like to also see the road as a school, and that would be the traveler. And I like to see the road as a church or mosque or synagogue, and that would be the pilgrim. And in control of my own travel destiny, I like to mix those three things together, and not just to be a hedonist and not just to be a monk, but to be thoughtful, to be spiritual, to be poetic, to be hedonistic, to be having fun with nature and meeting new people and drinking new drinks. And that's just what really carbonates the whole experience.
You've written about fear, and you mentioned fear earlier. Has there been any time that fear has stopped you from traveling somewhere?
Sure. I'm afraid to go to North Korea. I'd never go there. There's smart fear. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get mugged. I don't want to be caught in a war. I don't want to be cowering in a little corner with a bunch of people trapped in a nightmarish travel experience. I'm not that bold. I'm not a thrill seeker in my travels. I just want to get out of my comfort zone. I like to, a lot of people ask me what's my favorite country, and because I always write about Europe, Europe's my beat. I surprise them when I say India. Why India? Well, I just find India really rearranges my cultural furniture. It wallops my ethnocentricity, and it reminds me that we are not the norm. I love being reminded that we Westerners are not the norm. And that's a very, very cool part of travel. The world's not a pyramid with the United States on top and everybody else trying to figure it out.
What has it taught you about America that you might not have known or felt if you hadn't traveled as much as you have?
Oh, there's lots of things. I mean, my parents taught me the work ethic. It was presented to me as the work ethic. This is the work ethic. You work hard. And I've traveled around the world and I realized there are different work ethics. And that's okay. Some people have a better balance in their life. Some people take a break when they want to take a break. Some people don't work when the sun's out. They decide, even though that would be a better time to work from a productivity point of view, they play when the sun's out. It's a choice you make. Those kind of things are exciting.
Rick, a conversation that wasn't around when you were a teenager or when I was a teenager traveling, and which kind of ties into the idea of thoughtful travel and the stresses that we mentioned about the world, is obviously climate change. I'm just wondering whether the whole concept of climate and traveling at a time of climate change has changed at all the way you think about traveling and your own travel?
Well, I'm not going to be flight shamed out of my travels, but I am going to ethically mitigate the carbon I create when I fly. And I'm going to travel in a way that minimizes my carbon footprint. And I'm going to travel in a way, hopefully, that maximizes the positive results of my travel, which is becoming a citizen of the planet. I take 30,000 people to Europe on our tours every year, and our government's never going to be this ethical. But as an ethical businessman, I need to pay for my goods, cost of goods sold. 30,000 people contribute $30 each, $900,000 rounded up to $1 million. I have a self-imposed carbon tax of $1 million a year that I invest in a portfolio of 10 nonprofit organizations that help farmers south of the border in the global south do their work while contributing less to climate change. But then the flip side of that coin is travel in a way that gets you out of your comfort zone. So you come home with a broader perspective. And that's the beautiful souvenir that we need more than ever right now. If our travels can save us from one needless war, that's going to do a lot to cut back on the heartache and the pollution in this planet. And that's a good thing.
Rick Steves, thank you very much.
Nice to be with you, Katty, and best wishes in your travels.